There is a version of the story where I tell you what I saw that night, and you assume it was exhaustion, or moonlight, or a mind that had been running on adrenaline for too many hours in a row. I would have believed that too, if it weren't for what one of my teammates said to me 2 weeks later, alone, with no way of knowing what I'd seen, and no way I could have told him. I was deployed in Kosovo, doing the kind of work that doesn't make headlines and isn't supposed to. Recon. Night movement. Covering long distances on foot, through unfamiliar terrain, while staying completely invisible to anyone who happened to be out there. You learn to move differently on those missions. Quieter. Slower in the way that actually gets you somewhere faster, because speed without discipline gets people hurt. You learn to read tree lines and shadows and the small sounds that don't belong. And over enough missions, you start to think you've got a decent read on what's normal out there in the dark, and what isn't. This mission was supposed to be one of the easier ones. We'd been dropped in a remote area to figure out whether shipments of mortar rounds and mines were being moved through the region, the kind of intelligence gathering work where success looks like absolutely nothing happening, where the best outcome is a long boring walk that confirms what we already suspected and gives the people above us something solid to act on. Our extraction point was just over 17 kilometers away, and we needed to make it there before daybreak. The terrain wasn't bad. We had decent intel on the area already, and the moon that night was close to full, bright enough that visibility wasn't going to be a problem, which under most circumstances is exactly what you want on a night movement like this. Our team usually ran 4 men. That night we had 7, because it was a good opportunity to bring some of the newer guys along and let them get real experience on a relatively low-risk mission. I was running rear security that night, which meant I was the last man in the formation, watching our 6, making sure nothing was creeping up behind us that the rest of the team wasn't positioned to see. Right in front of me was a guy I'll just call L. We'd worked together enough times that we didn't need to talk much to stay coordinated. He knew how I moved, I knew how he moved, and between the two of us, we had the back of that formation covered without having to think too hard about it. We covered about 10 kilometers without incident. Good pace, no contact, nothing flagged. At that point we needed to cut over a fairly large hill and pass near a village. Not through it, just close enough that we needed to stay sharp and continue on toward our extraction point. We regrouped quickly, did a head count, checked ammo and gear, and got moving again. Because I was rear security, I was always the last one to start moving once we picked our formation back up. And just as I was about to fall in behind everyone else, I heard something in the trees. Maybe 50 meters off to our flank. I turned, and L was already looking in the exact same direction. He'd heard it too. That's the thing about working with someone long enough. You don't have to ask if they heard it. You just see it on their face and you already know. The rest of the team kept moving. The newer guys hadn't built the habit yet of checking back on their security every 20 meters or so. The kind of habit that becomes second nature after enough missions, so they just kept walking, and Elle and I were starting to fall behind. Realistically, the sound was probably nothing. A deer. Some piece of wildlife doing exactly what wildlife does at night in a wooded area. That's what I told myself, anyway. Elle and I started moving again, using a 2-man bounding technique, basically alternating who's moving and who's covering, so neither of us is ever fully exposed at the same time. We kept hearing it. Not constant, just there, on and off, somewhere in the tree line. I told Elle to push ahead and rejoin the rest of the team while I held position behind some cover, watching. He took off. I stayed where I was, completely still, breathing as quietly and evenly as I could manage, scanning everything in front of me and to both sides. Then I saw the trees move. About 15 meters out. Not wind. Not branches settling. Something had shifted the way only something with weight and intention shifts a tree line. Everything in me just stopped. I held that position for 2 full minutes, which sounds short until you've actually tried to stay perfectly still and perfectly quiet for 2 minutes while every instinct in your body is screaming at you to move. Meanwhile, Elle and the rest of the team had quietly worked their way back around to flank whatever had been following us, coming in from the sides, boxing in the area I'd signaled. Once everyone was in position, I moved up to clear it with them. Nothing. No footprints. No tracks. No broken brush. No disturbed ground. Nothing that should be there if something large enough to move a tree line had actually been standing in that spot 2 minutes earlier. The guys gave Elle and me a hard time about it for the rest of that leg, the kind of good-natured ribbing you get from people you trust, the implication being that the two of us had spooked ourselves over a deer. I let them have it. It was easier than trying to explain a feeling I couldn't fully justify yet myself. We got moving again. I fell back into rear security, with Elle between me and the rest of the formation, same as before. This time, when I peeled off to take my position, there was no noise. Nothing. We covered another 2 kilometers without incident, until we reached an orchard we needed to move through to stay on our route. The moonlight in that orchard was almost too bright. Honestly, the trees spaced out evenly enough that the light came through in these long silver bands across the ground. We stuck close to the middle of the rows, using the trunks for cover as we moved. The way you train to do even when nothing seems wrong, because the moment you stop doing the small discipline things is exactly the moment something happens. Right before I stepped into the orchard, I heard the noise again. Same kind of sound as before, except this time, my brain processed it differently. It sounded like a little girl giggling. I want to be clear about something. That is not a sound my imagination generates on its own. If I'd been expecting anything in that moment, it would have been wildlife, the rustle of something moving through brush, maybe a dog from the nearby village. A child's laugh, clear and small and completely out of place, was not something my mind would have invented to fill in a gap. It landed wrong. It landed like something real. Elle had pushed ahead about 20 meters and stopped to wait for me, same rhythm as before. I moved to a tree, crouched down, and started watching, doing what rear security does, scanning for anything, expecting nothing in particular, just doing the job. And then the tree next to me caught my attention. There were knots in the bark, the kind every old tree has, the natural whorls and divots that, if you stare at them long enough in the right light, start to look like something. I squinted at it, the way you do when your brain is trying to resolve a shape out of randomness, and the shape resolved into something I was not prepared for. A little girl's face, looking back at me. And as I watched, she turned toward me, smiling, and lifted a small hand and waved, and giggled. Not in a way that read as threatening. Not malicious, not predatory, nothing I could point to and call dangerous in the moment. Just a child, waving at me from inside a tree, the way a kid waves at someone through a window. And then she was gone. Back into the wood grain, like she'd never been there at all. I want you to sit with how that feels for a second, because words don't really do it justice. I was a trained soldier, on a real mission, in real danger, and what I was looking at made absolutely no sense within any framework I had for understanding the world. I didn't feel fear exactly, not in the way I'd feel fear from incoming fire or a real threat. It was something stranger than fear. A kind of vertigo, like the ground I was standing on had quietly stopped being solid for a second. There was no chance, none, that I was walking back to my team and reporting that I'd just seen a little girl's face appear out of a tree and wave at me. I made peace with that decision instantly. I assumed in that moment that I was simply losing it, that the stress of the deployment had finally cracked something loose in my head, and the smartest thing I could do was keep it to myself and never bring it up again. So I got up, caught up to Elle, and said nothing. We finished the mission. We hit our extraction point before daybreak, same as planned, and got out. 2 weeks passed. I got pulled to provide security for a combat engineer team working in an area I already knew, while the rest of my squad went back through that same stretch of terrain, the same hill, the same orchard, where Elle and I had supposedly gotten spooked over nothing. I remember being almost relieved that I wasn't going back there with them. I never told a single person what I'd actually seen. The work with the engineers turned out to matter. We located a minefield that had been recently laid, in an area where local kids walked through every single day on their way to wherever kids walk on their way to. The engineers handled notifying the village and started clearing it, and I came away from that day with a genuine, simple kind of pride, the feeling of having actually helped prevent something terrible from happening to people who had no idea the danger was even there. I got back to base, debriefed, got a quick word of thanks from my commander, and headed to my barracks, a place I barely ever got to spend time in. I just got my boots off when the door opened and the rest of my team came piling in, loud, laughing, except for Elle, who clearly was not laughing, telling everyone to knock it off. One of the guys spotted me and said something like, "Hey, your buddy says he's never going back to your favorite spot again." I just grimaced and let it pass. I figured it was more of the same teasing from 2 weeks earlier. A couple of days later, Elle and I ended up out together again, this time providing security for a scout team, plenty of downtime in between, the kind of quiet stretch where conversation tends to wander. And out of nowhere, he asked me, "What did you see that night?" I gave him the same answer I'd given myself for 2 weeks. I shrugged it off. Said it was probably just my imagination getting the better of me out there. And then he said something that I still feel in my chest when I think about it now, years later. He said, "I know you saw her. I saw her too. Tell me I'm not crazy." I want you to understand what that meant in that exact moment. I had told absolutely no one what I'd seen. Not a word, not a detail, nothing that could have given him anything to work backward from. When I saw that little girl's face appear in the bark and wave at me, Elle was a full 40 meters away, on the other side of several trees, in a different position entirely. There was no way he could have seen what I saw, where I saw it, from where he was standing. And yet here he was, describing the exact same thing, unprompted, with no information from me to base it on. I felt completely numb. I told him he wasn't crazy. I asked him where he'd seen her. He said, "Inside a tree." I still don't have an explanation for what happened that night. Not one that satisfies me, anyway. I know what I saw. I know Elle saw something close enough to identical that there's no reasonable way to write it off as two separate men independently imagining the exact same impossible thing, in the exact same place, on the exact same night. Whatever she was, whatever that orchard held, she wasn't hostile. She didn't chase us, didn't follow us out, didn't show up again on any of the missions we ran through that area afterward. But Elle never went back through that stretch of terrain again if he could help it. And honestly, neither did I, not without that orchard sitting somewhere in the back of my mind the entire time. A little girl's face folded into the bark of a tree, waving at two grown men carrying rifles through her woods in the middle of the night, like we were the ones who didn't belong there. There is a room that sat directly above my bedroom for 8 years. I slept under it every single night without knowing it was there, without knowing what was inside it, and by the time I found out, it was almost too late to matter, because we were already packing up to leave. I grew up in a strange little house. I want to spend a minute on just how strange it was, because the strangeness matters. It's part of why none of what happened later felt entirely impossible to me, even as a kid. The house was tall and thin, almost comically so, like one of those narrow row houses you see crammed in between other buildings in old cities, except ours stood completely on its own, freestanding on every side, just built like it had been squeezed into a lot meant for something half its width. 3 full floors, plus a basement, plus an attic stacked on top of all of it, the whole structure rising up like a chimney with rooms inside it. It was full of the kind of details that only make sense in a house built before anyone cared about things making sense. 2 fireplaces that still worked, actually worked, not just decorative holes in the wall. A shower stall sitting, for no reason anyone could explain, directly in the center of the basement, just out in the open concrete space like someone had changed their mind halfway through building the place. A backyard so small you could stand in the middle of it and touch the fence in almost any direction without taking more than a few steps. And my personal favorite, an honest-to-God dumbwaiter, the old rope pull kind, running from the kitchen all the way up to my bedroom, a little wooden box on a pulley system that I used constantly as a kid, mostly to send snacks up to myself like some tiny lord receiving tribute. I loved that house. I want to be clear about that, because everything I'm about to tell you happened inside a place I genuinely adored. A place that felt more like a character than a building, all its weird quirks stacked on top of each other like someone had let a committee of slightly unhinged architects each design one floor without talking to each other. But it was old. Old in the way that eventually costs real money, the kind of old where every repair reveals 2 more repairs hiding behind it, and eventually my parents did the math and realized they were pouring money into a house that was never going to stop asking for more. We were moving. I didn't fully understand the financial reasoning at the time. I just understood that boxes were appearing in every room and that my childhood home had an expiration date now. Packing was its own kind of chaos. I was a kid, so my version of packing mostly involved throwing things down the dumbwaiter shaft toward the kitchen, watching them disappear into the dark of the chute with a satisfying clatter, and cramming clothes into my closet with such density that they eventually stopped being individual garments and became something closer to a single solid mass, a brick of fabric I had to physically climb to reach the back of the closet. It was while I was excavating that fabric brick, trying to get the last of my clothes out, that I found something I had somehow never noticed in years of living in that room. Up near the ceiling of my closet, tucked into the slope where the roofline cut inward, was an attic entrance. A simple panel, easy to miss if you weren't standing exactly where I was standing, at exactly the angle I happened to be standing at, digging through the densest part of the clothing brick. I was an adventurous kid, and an attic I'd never explored was, frankly, the most interesting thing that had happened to me in weeks. I pushed the panel open. I climbed up onto the compressed mass of clothing, using it like a step stool, and pulled myself up into the dark. The first thing that struck me, before anything else, was that it wasn't actually dark. Not fully. The attic was strung, wall to wall, with old Christmas lights. Not modern ones. The big old-fashioned kind, thick-colored bulbs on a cord, and a lot of them were red. They were still burning, somehow, after God knows how long, casting this dim, reddish, smoldering kind of light across the whole space. The kind of glow that doesn't illuminate so much as it suggests shapes, half revealing things and leaving the rest to your imagination. Underneath that red light, I could also see dozens of tiny cracks and gaps in the floor, little fissures of brighter light leaking up from below, and I realized with a slow, creeping kind of fascination that I was looking down into the bedrooms underneath me. I could see straight down into my own room and my brother's room through these small irregular slits in the floorboards, like the entire attic was a kind of hidden observation deck stretched out over our whole lives. The second thing I noticed took longer to register, because it was less obviously strange and more quietly wrong. The attic wasn't just storage. It was set up. The insulation that should have been exposed, all that pink fiberglass batting you'd expect to see tacked between the beams, had been carefully covered over with sheets of plastic, like someone had gone through the effort of making the space livable, of making sure nothing would itch or irritate skin that touched it. There was an old gurney, an actual hospital gurney, shoved against one wall, piled high with sleeping bags and bundled sheets, the fabric gone gray and soft-looking with age. And against the far wall sat a refrigerator, mint green, rusted along every seam, the kind of appliance you'd expect to see hauled to a junkyard decades ago. I want you to understand, I was a kid, and kids are curious in a way that completely overrides good sense, so instead of immediately recognizing how deeply wrong all of this was, I walked over and opened that refrigerator. It hummed to life. It worked. After however many years it had sat up there, untouched, forgotten, sealed inside the hottest, most airless part of an old house, it still worked. I think that's the moment the fear should have started. Looking back, that's the moment any reasonable person would have turned around, climbed back down through that closet panel, and never gone up there again. But I was still a kid standing in a half-lit attic discovering a working fridge, and curiosity hadn't yet given way to dread. That came next. The third thing I noticed was the bones. I want to say that plainly, because there's no clever way to ease into it. There were bones. A lot of them. Heaped into several distinct piles scattered loosely around the center of the attic floor, like someone had been sorting and organizing them at some point and then abandoned the project halfway through. I was young, and I didn't have any real understanding of anatomy beyond what you'd pick up from a school textbook, so I couldn't tell you with any confidence what most of them belonged to. But there was variety. Small bones, no bigger than my own fingers. Large bones, long and heavy-looking, the kind that made my stomach do something strange just from looking at them. Some were clean and bleached almost white, like they'd been sitting up there drying out for years. Others looked different, less finished somehow, in a way I didn't have the vocabulary for at the time and still struggle to describe now. They weren't arranged with any obvious pattern that I could see. Just heaped, clump after clump, like someone had been collecting them over a long stretch of time and never quite settled on what they were supposed to do with them once they had them. Two of the piles were different from the rest. Blackened. Charred, like someone had tried to burn them and either run out of patience or run out of whatever was needed to finish the job. And on the walls nearest those two piles, in that same dark, sooty residue, there was writing. Not careful writing. Smears, mostly, dragged across the wood in long, uneven strokes, like whoever made them had been working with their fingers instead of any kind of tool. Most of it wasn't legible. Just streaks, marks, the visual residue of motion without clear shape. But one word appeared again and again, scrawled in that same charcoal smear, repeated across different sections of the wall like whoever wrote it couldn't stop themselves from writing it over and over. Sorry. Just that. Over and over, in different spots, different sizes, some smudged like a hand had dragged back through the word after writing it. Like maybe they tried to wipe it away and changed their mind, or didn't have the strength to finish wiping, or simply stopped halfway through whatever they were feeling in that moment. I don't remember climbing back down. I genuinely don't. There's a gap in my memory between standing in that reddish light staring at the word sorry smeared across old wood, and being back in my room, panel closed, clothing brick undisturbed beneath me, like my body made the decision to leave before my brain had finished processing what it was looking at. I never told anyone at the time. I want to be honest about that, because it's the detail that still bothers me the most, more than the bones themselves, more than the writing. I was a kid who had just found a hidden, lit, furnished, bone-filled room directly above his own bedroom, and instead of running downstairs and telling my parents immediately, some part of me buried it instead. Maybe I didn't have the words for what I'd seen. Maybe some instinct told me that saying it out loud would make it real in a way I wasn't ready for. Either way, I just packed the rest of my room in silence, kept glancing up at that closet ceiling like it might do something, and didn't say a word. We moved out not long after that. I never went back up there. I never told my parents what I found until years later, long after the house had new owners, long after there was nothing anyone could have done about it even if they'd wanted to. What I think about most, when I let myself think about it at all, is the 8 years before that day. 8 years of falling asleep under that ceiling. 8 years of small cracks of light I never noticed, of someone, at some point, stringing up Christmas lights and laying out sleeping bags and stocking a refrigerator in a space directly above a child's bedroom. 8 years of whatever happened up there, happening, while I slept 15 feet below it, completely unaware, completely unprotected, completely trusting that the ceiling over my head was just a ceiling. I don't know who used that space, or when, or what those bones actually were, or whose hand wrote that word again and again across a wall in soot and ash. I never went looking for answers, and at this point, I don't think I want them. Some questions, I've learned, are better left exactly where you found them. Sealed behind a panel. Tucked above a closet. Left in the dark, where they can't follow you down into the rest of your life. But every so often, usually late at night, in a house that isn't even that house anymore, I catch myself looking up at the ceiling above my bed. And I think about how thin the line really is between a roof and a room you don't know is there. And how long something can sit directly above you, patient and quiet, while you sleep underneath it, completely certain that you are alone. I keep a rule now, and I'm going to tell it to you before I tell you anything else, because I need you to understand how seriously I mean it. If you are ever alone in the woods after dark, and you hear your name called out by a voice that sounds exactly right, do not answer. I don't care how much it sounds like someone you love. I don't care how close it sounds, or how scared it sounds, or how much it sounds like they need you. You do not answer. I learned that rule the hardest way a person can learn anything, and I am going to spend the rest of my life grateful that I only had to learn part of it the hard way, because the other part of the lesson is something I will never, ever get back. This happened 3 years ago, at a cabin my family has owned for 2 generations, sitting on 11 acres at the end of a logging road in the kind of deep, old-growth forest that doesn't really exist in most places anymore. My grandfather built it with his own hands. My father grew up going there every summer, and so did I, and so did my younger brother, Dean. It was the one constant thing in our lives, the place we always came back to, no matter what else was happening, no matter how far apart life had pulled the rest of us. Dean and I weren't close as adults. We loved each other the way brothers do when they've drifted into different lives, different cities, different versions of who they turned out to be. But the cabin was neutral ground. The cabin was where we were still just brothers, the way we'd been as kids. The trip that changed everything was supposed to be exactly that. Just the two of us, a long weekend, no phones, no agenda, just the woods and the lake, and the kind of conversations that are easier to have around a fire than across a dinner table. We drove up on a Thursday afternoon, the gravel road kicking up dust behind us for the better part of 40 minutes after we left the last paved turn, and by the time we pulled up to the cabin, the light was already going long and gold through the trees, that late afternoon color that makes everything look like a memory of itself before it's even happened. I want to describe the cabin to you, because the layout matters for what comes later. It's a single story, but a big single story. 3 bedrooms branching off a central great room with a stone fireplace my grandfather built himself out of rocks he hauled up from the creek bed one at a time over the course of an entire summer. A wraparound porch on 3 sides. Windows everywhere, because my grandfather always said a cabin without enough light just turns into a different kind of cave. Behind the cabin, the land slopes down toward a small lake, maybe a half-mile of trail through dense forest. The kind of forest where the canopy gets thick enough that even at noon it feels like dusk underneath it. We spent that first evening exactly the way I'd imagined. Fire going, beers in hand, the kind of meandering conversation you only have with someone who's known you your whole life. Dean talked about his job, which he hated. I talked about a relationship that had just ended, which I hadn't fully processed yet. We laughed about things our father used to say up there, dumb fishing advice that turned out to be completely wrong, stories about getting lost on the trail as kids and our mother losing her mind with worry until we wandered back out 2 hours later, filthy and unbothered. It was, genuinely, one of the best nights I'd had with my brother in years. I want you to hold on to that, because it's important that you understand what we lost wasn't just safety. It was that. It was exactly that kind of night, the kind we'd been missing for a long time, finally happening again. We went to bed late, both of us a little drunk, both of us happy in that loose, unguarded way you only get to be around family. I fell asleep almost instantly. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, except that it was the deep, total dark of the middle of the night, the kind where your eyes take a long time to adjust to anything at all. I woke up because I heard Dean's voice, from somewhere outside. He was calling my name. Not screaming, not panicked, just calling out, the way you'd call someone to come look at something, easy and casual. Hey, come check this out. Something like that. I remember lying there for a second, disoriented, trying to figure out why my brother would be outside in the middle of the night, and assuming, in that groggy half-awake state, that he'd probably just gone out to look at the stars, or gotten up to pee and spotted some wildlife he wanted me to see. I got up. I want you to understand that I did not hesitate, not even a little, because there was nothing in his voice that suggested anything was wrong. It sounded exactly like him. Not almost like him. Exactly. The same cadence he'd had since we were kids, the specific way he says my name that nobody else replicates quite right, even people who've known me for years. I walked out onto the porch, and the night air hit me, cold and sharp, and I called back to him, asking where he was. His voice came again, from somewhere out past the tree line, toward the trail that led down to the lake, still calling my name, still that same easy, unbothered tone, like he just wanted to show me something and was a little impatient that I was taking my time getting there. I started down the steps. I had actually made it about 10 yards into the yard, the cold grass damp under my bare feet, before something made me stop. It was the dog. We'd brought our father's old retriever with us on the trip, a sweet, ancient dog named Scout who'd never shown an aggressive bone in his body in his entire life. Scout had followed me out onto the porch, and instead of trotting ahead toward Dean's voice the way he normally would have, he had planted himself at the top of the steps and would not move. He was staring out into the dark, toward the same direction the voice was coming from, and he was growling. Low, continuous, the kind of sound that comes from somewhere instinctual, somewhere underneath whatever a dog's version of conscious thought is. I stood there in the yard, looking back at him, and something cold settled into my stomach that had nothing to do with the night air. The voice called again. Closer this time, I thought, though it's hard to say for certain in the dark, in the woods, with sound bouncing off trees in ways that make distance feel unreliable. Still my brother's voice. Still saying my name, Still that same casual tone, like nothing in the world was wrong, like he genuinely just wanted me to come see something. But Scout would not move from that porch. I went back inside. I told myself, even as I was doing it, that I was being ridiculous, that I was letting an old dog's nerves spook me out of going to see what my own brother wanted to show me. But some part of me, somewhere underneath the part that wanted to dismiss it, was already listening to a different kind of logic. I went to Dean's room. The door was open. The bed was empty, sheets thrown back like he'd gotten up in a hurry, or in his sleep, or just gotten up the normal way people get up in the middle of the night. I stood in that doorway for a long moment, and outside, the voice kept calling, patient, unbothered, calling my name like it had all the time in the world. I made a decision in that doorway that I have replayed every single day since. I decided not to go outside again. I told myself I would wait for morning. I told myself that whatever this was, going out into total darkness, into deep woods, toward a voice that sounded right but felt wrong in some way I couldn't articulate, while my own dog refused to follow, was not a decision I was equipped to make at 3 in the morning, half drunk, alone. I locked the front door. I want you to sit with that, because I need you to understand what it cost me to do it. I locked the door of a cabin that my brother might genuinely have been standing outside of, and I sat down on the couch with Scout pressed against my leg, shaking, and I listened. The voice called maybe 4 or 5 more times over the next 20 minutes. Each time, it sounded slightly different. Not in pitch or tone, but in something harder to describe, like a recording played back one too many times, each repetition losing some infinitesimal fraction of what made it real the time before. By the 5th call, it didn't sound exactly like Dean anymore. It sounded like something that had heard Dean's voice once, perfectly, and was now reproducing it from memory with a fidelity that was almost perfect, but not quite, the way a forger's signature is almost perfect, until you look closely enough to see where the hand hesitated. And then it stopped. The silence after that was worse than the calling had been. I sat on that couch until the windows started turning gray with the first hint of dawn, Scout never once relaxing beside me, and the second there was enough light to see by, I went looking for my brother. I found him on the trail, about a quarter mile toward the lake, sitting on a fallen log, completely fine. Confused, cold, but fine. He told me he'd woken up in the middle of the night because he heard me calling him, my voice, exactly my voice, telling him to come look at something down by the water. He'd followed it out onto the trail, calling back to me the whole way, getting more and more confused when I never answered, until eventually the voice just stopped, and he realized he had no idea where I actually was or how long he'd been walking, and he sat down on that log to wait for daylight rather than wander deeper into unfamiliar woods at night. We stood there on that trail, in the gray early light, and pieced it together. While I was hearing him outside calling my name, he was hearing me, somewhere else entirely, calling his. 2 different directions. 2 different voices, each one perfect, each one calling the other one out into the dark, alone. We didn't say much on the walk back to the cabin. I don't think either of us had the words yet for what we were both starting to understand, which was that something out there had used our own voices, our actual voices, with enough precision to fool 2 people who had known each other their entire lives, and it had used them to try to get us to walk out into the woods alone, separately, in the middle of the night. We packed up that morning. Neither of us said it out loud, but neither of us suggested staying another night either. We loaded the truck in near silence, Scout pacing nervously around our feet the whole time, refusing to wander more than a few yards from either of us, and we got in the truck and started down that long gravel road back toward the highway. We were maybe 2 miles from the cabin, deep enough in the trees that the canopy still blocked most of the morning light, when Dean asked me to stop the truck. I want to be honest with you about what happened next, because I have gone over it so many times that I sometimes worry I'm remembering it wrong, smoothing it into something that makes more sense than what actually happened. But I trust this part. I trust it because it's the part one can't stop seeing. Dean said he heard something. Said it sounded like a kid, somewhere off in the trees to the right of the road, crying, like they were lost or hurt. I didn't hear anything. I told him so. I told him we needed to keep driving, that after the night we just had, the absolute last thing either of us should do was stop the truck in these woods for any reason at all. He wasn't listening to me. I watched something happen to his face in that moment that I have no good way of describing except to say that it was like watching someone get pulled by a string I couldn't see. He said he had to check, just for a second, that if there really was a kid out there, he couldn't just drive away. That's who Dean was, underneath everything else. He was someone who couldn't drive past a kid who might need help, even with everything we just lived through telling him not to trust a single sound this forest produced. I grabbed his arm. I told him no. I told him about Scout, about the voice, about everything we'd just agreed to without ever fully saying it out loud. And for a second, I thought he was going to listen. Then he said, "I can see her." I followed where he was looking, off through the trees to the right, maybe 30 yards into the woods, and for just a second I thought I saw something too. A small shape, pale, low to the ground, moving between two trunks. It could have been anything. A trick of light through leaves. An animal. I genuinely don't know, and not knowing is its own kind of torment, because if I'd been certain it was nothing, I think I could have held onto him. He was out of the truck before I could stop him. I went after him immediately. I want that on record. I did not hesitate the way I had the night before. I was out of that truck and into the trees within seconds, calling his name, and for a while, I could still see him, moving ahead of me through the underbrush, following something I couldn't quite see myself, calling out to whoever or whatever he thought was out there, telling her it was okay, telling her he was coming. The forest in that section was thicker than I remembered, the light dimmer, the ground uneven in ways that made it impossible to move as fast as I needed to. I kept losing sight of him and finding him again, kept calling his name and hearing him answer, his voice pulling further and further away from me each time, until at some point, without any single moment I could point to as the one where it happened, I stopped being able to find him at all. I spent what I think was close to 2 hours in those woods. I have no real way of confirming the time, because I'd left my phone in the truck, and panic does strange things to your sense of how long anything takes. I called his name until my voice gave out. I heard him answer, over and over, from different directions each time, his voice always just slightly out of reach, always pulling me deeper, until somewhere in that stretch of time, I started to understand that I was not chasing my brother anymore. I was being led. I want to tell you I figured that out in time to do something useful with it. I didn't. I kept going. Because even once some small, rational part of my brain understood what was happening, the rest of me could not let go of the chance, however small, that some of those calls really were him, that stopping meant abandoning him for certain in a forest that was actively trying to separate the two of us as far as it possibly could. The moment I finally stopped was not a moment of clarity. It was exhaustion. I physically could not run anymore, could not climb over one more fallen log, could not push through one more wall of brush, and I sat down against a tree, soaked in sweat despite the cold, and I just listened. The forest had gone completely silent. No birds. No wind moving through the canopy. No distant sound of water from the lake. Just a silence so total it felt like the woods themselves were holding their breath, waiting to see what I would do next. And then, very close, close enough that it should have meant whoever it was standing almost directly behind me, I heard Dean's voice say my name. Quiet this time. Not calling out across distance. Just saying it, the way you'd say it to someone sitting right next to you. I did not turn around. I don't fully know how I found the will not to, in that moment, after everything in me had been built around answering my brother's voice my entire life. But something about the quietness of it, the closeness of it, after hours of it calling from a distance, told me with total certainty that whatever was standing behind me was not him. I stayed completely still, staring straight ahead at the tree in front of me, and I heard it again, my own name, patient, unbothered, exactly the way Dean's voice had sounded the night before on the porch, exactly that same quality of something reciting a perfect copy of a thing it did not actually understand. It did not touch me. I want to be clear about that because I have read enough about this kind of thing since then to know how these stories usually escalate, and I want you to know that mine didn't, not in that way. It simply stood there, close enough that I could feel something I can only describe as pressure in the air behind me, a wrongness in the temperature, and it said my name 3 more times, each one a little softer than the last, until eventually, the silence returned, and whatever had been standing behind me was gone. I don't know how long I sat there after that. long enough that the light had shifted considerably by the time I made myself stand up. I walked in the only direction that seemed to make sense, downhill, on the logic that downhill eventually meets a road or a creek or something that leads back to civilization, and after what felt like another hour, I came out onto the gravel logging road, maybe a half-mile from where the truck was still parked. The truck was exactly where we'd left it. Driver's door still open. Scout was inside, in the passenger seat, and the second he saw me, he started barking in a way I had never heard from him before or since. Frantic, desperate, like he'd been waiting that entire time for someone, anyone, to come back. Dean was not in the truck. Dean was not on the road. Dean was nowhere. I called 911 from a spot a few miles further down where I finally got a signal, and search and rescue was out there within hours. Dogs, helicopters, volunteers walking grid patterns through those woods for 4 straight days. They never found him. I want to tell you there was some kind of resolution, some explanation, some piece of evidence that gave our family even the smallest thread to hold on to, but there wasn't. No clothing. No tracks beyond the point where I'd lost sight of him. No sign that a person had ever passed through that section of forest at all, which is its own kind of horror, because it means whatever took my brother left him somewhere that hundreds of trained searchers and dogs with a fresh scent trail simply could not reach. I haven't been back to that cabin since. My parents sold the land about a year later, unable to keep paying property taxes on a place none of us could bring ourselves to set foot on again, and I don't know who owns it now, or whether they know anything about what happened there, or whether the woods around it are still doing whatever it is they do to people foolish enough to answer a voice that sounds right. I think about that night on the porch more than almost anything else in my life. I think about how close I came to walking into those trees myself, how the only thing standing between me and whatever happened to Dean was an old dog who refused to move, and a few extra seconds of hesitation that I will never fully understand why I had, and Dean didn't. I think about the moment in the truck when he said, "I can see her," and how easily that same sentence, with a slightly different shape, a slightly different voice, could have come out of my own mouth instead. And I think, more than anything, about the version of his voice that found me hours later, standing close behind me in the silence, saying my name like it had all the time in the world, the same patient, unbothered tone it had used on the porch the night before, like calling my name was simply something it did, over and over, indifferent to whether I ever answered, content to keep saying it into the dark for as long as it took. So that's the rule. That's the whole rule, and it's the only thing I have left to offer anyone who spends time in deep woods, far from other people, far from light. If you hear your name called by a voice that sounds exactly right, in a place where that person should not be, do not answer. Do not investigate. Do not assume that love or loyalty or the simple human instinct to help someone who needs you outweighs the wrongness of a voice in a place it doesn't belong. Because somewhere out there, something learned my brother's voice well enough to fool the person who knew it best in the entire world. And it is, as far as I know, still out there, patient, perfectly copying the people who wander too close, waiting for someone else to forget the rule the way Dean did. I sleep with a light on now, every night, no exceptions. Not because I think it will stop anything from coming, if it ever wanted to. Just so that if I ever hear my name called again, from somewhere outside, in a voice that sounds exactly right, I will at least be able to see the door clearly enough to make sure it stays locked. 4 or 5 years after this happened, I couldn't see a white truck without my whole body going cold. Didn't matter where I was, didn't matter if it was some soccer mom's truck in a grocery store parking lot. Didn't matter if there was zero reason for my heart to start slamming against my ribs. White truck. Adrenaline. Every single time. I was 13 years old when that happened to me, and I'm 23 now, and I still think about it more than I'd like to admit. I want to take you back to that day because I remember almost all of it in this strange, hyperclear way, like my brain decided this was important enough to keep every detail intact while it let 1,000 other memories from that age fade into nothing. It was a normal Sunday. I was out with my 2 best friends, Tim and Brandon, doing what we did almost every weekend back then, which was skating around our town for hours with no real destination, just riding until we got hungry or bored or both. We lived in a small town, not the kind of place where anything ever really happened. The kind of place where the biggest news of the month was somebody's dog getting loose, or the diner changing its hours. That matters, because it's part of why what happened felt so impossible while it was happening. Things like this didn't happen here. Not to us. Not on a Sunday afternoon with the sun out and people walking around everywhere. We'd been skating most of the day and decided to swing by the 7-Eleven before heading home, the way you do when you're 13 and have a few dollars in your pocket and a whole summer with nothing better to spend it on. We bought our drinks, grabbed some food, stood around the counter joking with each other the way 3 13-year-old boys do, and then headed back out toward the parking lot to start the walk home. Here's where I need you to picture the layout, because it matters for everything that happens next. The 7-Eleven sits right off a road, not a busy highway. This is a small town, I want to be clear about that. Just a regular 2-lane road that locals use to get around. To get back toward our side of town, we had to cross at the parking lot exit, wait for the light, and continue on foot. Behind us, at the gas pumps, regular Sunday traffic. Cars filling up. People going about their day. Nothing unusual. I was the one facing backward while we waited for the light to change. Just glancing back the way you do when you're standing around with nothing to look at, when I noticed a man at the pumps. 40, maybe 50 years old. Filling up a white pickup truck. And for whatever reason, in that moment, completely unprompted, completely unprovoked, he looked directly at me. I want you to understand that we hadn't said anything to him. We hadn't looked at him twice before that moment. We were 3 kids standing at a crosswalk holding Slurpees. There was nothing about us that should have registered to a grown man as anything worth looking at twice, let alone what happened next. He dropped the gas pump. Just let it fall, hose still attached, nozzle clattering against the pavement, and he was in his truck within seconds. I remember the speed of it more than anything. How fast a calm Sunday afternoon can turn into something else entirely, with absolutely no warning, with no build-up, with nothing that gave us even half a second to brace ourselves. He slammed on the gas, and he drove straight at us. I don't think I fully processed what was happening until the truck was already moving. There's this strange lag your brain goes through, this refusal to believe what your eyes are telling you, because the alternative explanation, that a stranger is actively trying to run you over in broad daylight outside a convenience store, doesn't fit anywhere in a 13-year-old's understanding of the world. By the time my brain caught up to what my eyes already knew, the truck was already on top of us. He missed. Barely. I felt the side mirror or the edge of the truck graze my arm as it passed. Close enough that the air it displaced hit me like a shove, and my skateboard, which had been sitting under my arm, was knocked clean out of my grip and skittered off across the pavement. Brandon screamed something at him, some angry teenage insult thrown at the back of a truck that had just nearly killed all 3 of us, and the man peeled out, tires screeching, and sped off into the lot next door. For one single second, I think all 3 of us thought it was over. That he'd scared us, made his point, whatever sick point that was, and left. He had not left. He drove through the drainage ditch between the 2 parking lots, this truck just bottoming out and bouncing as it crossed the gap, and came back around, and he was coming for us again. This time there was no hesitation. The 3 of us just ran. Pure, animal, full speed running, the kind where your body takes over completely and your brain just goes along for the ride. We crossed that road without even checking for traffic, because the only thing that mattered in that moment was the truck behind us, and we sprinted toward the library, which was 2 or 3 blocks away, the only landmark close enough to feel like safety. I looked back once. Just once, about half a block from the library, and I saw him. Still coming. Still full speed, still locked onto us. This grown man in a pickup truck chasing down 3 kids on a Sunday afternoon with what looked, from where I was, like genuine rage on his face. Not annoyance. Not road rage you forget about by the next light. Rage like we had done something to him, like this was personal, even though none of us had ever seen this man before in our lives. That's the part that still doesn't sit right with me, all these years later. We hadn't provoked him. We hadn't said a word to him before he got in that truck. Brandon's comment came after, screamed at his back as he was already driving away the first time. Whatever set this man off, it came from somewhere inside him that had nothing to do with us. We were just 3 kids who happened to be standing there. Tim and Brandon made it to the library doors. I didn't. I knew something they didn't, which was that the library was closed that day. It was a Sunday, and running toward locked doors with a man trying to run you down behind you is not a plan, it's a dead end. So instead, I broke off from them and ran toward the woods that bordered the lot, because I knew there was a trail back there. A trail that led, eventually, all the way to my own backyard. I'd walked it 100 times. I knew every turn of it without having to think. What I didn't know in that moment was which one of us he was actually after. I got one last look behind me before the tree line swallowed me up, and what I saw still makes my stomach drop when I think about it. He had pulled into the lot, gotten out of the truck, and gone to the bed of it, and pulled something out. I was far enough away by then, and running too hard, too scared, for my eyes to be totally reliable, but it looked like either a shotgun or a crowbar. I genuinely don't know which. I've spent 10 years not knowing which, and somehow that uncertainty has never made it feel any less real. I ran the entire length of that trail. I don't remember breathing the whole way. I don't remember my legs hurting, even though they must have. I just remember trees going past me and the absolute certainty that if I stopped, even for a second, something terrible was going to catch up to me. When I finally came out the other end, into the back of my own neighborhood, my legs nearly gave out from under me. I made it to my street, and that's when my neighbor, who happened to be Tim's dad, saw me and told me to get in the car immediately, because we needed to get to the video store, the one Tim's mom worked at, right then. I didn't fully understand why until I got there. Tim and Brandon were already there. So were 3 police officers. And about a minute after I walked in, my mother came through the door, and she was sobbing. Not crying. Sobbing, the kind that comes from somewhere far past fear, because Tim and Brandon had told her they didn't know whether I was alive. They told her the man had gone after me, into the woods, and they had no idea what had happened after that. For however many minutes it took her to get to that video store, my mother had genuinely believed I might be dead, or taken, or something she couldn't even let herself finish thinking. And here's the detail that has stayed lodged in my chest more than almost anything else from that day. Tim told me, once things had calmed down enough for anyone to talk, that he watched the man run after me specifically. Not toward the library doors he and Brandon had gone through, toward the woods, toward me. I had spent that entire sprint through the trees assuming the danger was behind my friends, that I was the lucky one who'd found an escape route while they were the ones in real trouble. The whole time, it had been the opposite. He had chosen me. The man was never caught. No arrest, no name, no white truck pulled over 3 towns away with a registration that matched. Just a police report and a description that, in a town that size, should have meant something, and somehow didn't lead anywhere at all. And I think that's the part that turned this from a scary afternoon into something that followed me for years. There wasn't an ending. There wasn't a moment where someone told me he'd been caught, where I got to exhale and file the whole thing away as finished. It just stopped, mid-sentence, and stayed that way. There's one more thing I need you to understand about that day, because it's the detail that still makes my skin crawl more than the truck itself. My town wasn't empty. This wasn't some abandoned stretch of road where nobody would have seen what was happening. There were people everywhere. At the gas station. In the parking lot. Walking along the road we sprinted across. I'd guess close to 100 people total, within sight of 3 kids being chased by a man trying to run them down with his truck, and not one of them did anything. Not one car pulled over. Not one person stepped in. I remember that more than almost anything else, the feeling of running for my life in full view of 100 strangers and understanding, somewhere underneath the panic, that none of them were coming to help. That I was, in every way that mattered in that moment, completely alone. I still think about white trucks. Less now than I used to, but it never fully goes away, not really. There's a particular kind of fear that doesn't come from monsters or ghosts or anything you can explain away with an old house settling in the night. It's the fear of an ordinary Sunday afternoon, in a town where nothing ever happens, when a stranger looks at you for half a second too long, and decides, for reasons you will never know and never get to ask him, that you are the one he's going to come after. I got away. Tim and Brandon got away. We all went home that night, shaken, but alive. But somewhere out there, in a town that small, is a man who once chased down 3 13-year-old kids in broad daylight, in front of 100 witnesses, and simply drove away from it. And nobody ever came looking for him again. My grandparents' house is old. Not creaky floorboards, old, actually old, the kind of old where the walls have absorbed 80, 90 years of other people's lives before my family ever set foot inside it. It's the kind of house that has a history nobody bothered to write down, just passed along in fragments, in offhand comments at the dinner table, in stories told to scare kids into staying in bed. I grew up visiting that house. Holidays, summers, long weekends. And for as long as I can remember, there has been exactly one rule I never had to be told twice. Don't go upstairs alone. I couldn't tell you why. There was no specific moment, no incident I could point to as a kid and say, that's when it started. It was just a feeling. The kind of dread that lives in your stomach before your brain has caught up enough to explain it. The stairs themselves looked completely ordinary. Same as any other staircase in any other old house. But something about the air at the top of them felt different. Heavier. Like walking into a room that's already occupied, except the room is empty, and you're the only one in it. I avoided it instinctively. If I needed something from upstairs, I'd ask someone to come with me, even in broad daylight, even as a teenager, even now, at 23. Fully an adult who should logically have grown out of being afraid of an empty hallway. I haven't. I still won't go up there by myself. Not once. Not ever. There's one room in particular. You go up the stairs, turn down a short hallway, and at the very end is a long, narrow bedroom. Closets on the left and right as soon as you walk in, a bed sitting roughly in the center of the room, and a single window at the far end, directly across from the door. It's not a big room. If you stood in the doorway and threw a ball, it would hit the window in about 2 seconds. My grandparents told me once, almost as a joke, almost as a piece of house trivia, that the family who lived there before them had 2 sons. And those 2 sons used to tell their parents that at night, a gorilla, that's the actual word that was used, gorilla, would come out of one of the closets, dance around the room, and climb back inside. As a kid, I heard that story and just filed it away as a weird, funny detail about a weird old house. Kids say strange things. Kids have nightmares and give them stranger shapes than adults do. I didn't think about it again for years. Not until I was the one sleeping in the room directly underneath it. When I was about 14, my grandparents started sleeping in separate bedrooms. I didn't ask why, and they didn't explain, and it wasn't really my business anyway. What it meant practically was that the room I usually slept in was no longer available, so I got moved to a different bedroom. On the first floor. Directly below that narrow upstairs room. The one with the closets on either side. The one with the gorilla story. I want to be clear about the layout here, because it matters for what happened next. My grandparents' bedrooms were also both on the first floor. Nobody, and I mean nobody, was sleeping upstairs. The entire second floor of that house, every single night, sat completely empty. I didn't think much of the room swap at the time. It was just a different bed in a different part of the house. I unpacked, I settled in, the day went on as normal, and that night, like every night at their house, the lights went off and the house went quiet. That's when I heard it for the first time. I was lying in bed, still awake, that specific kind of awake where your body's tired but your brain hasn't caught up yet, when I heard it. Thump, thump, thump. Slow, deliberate. Starting from one end of the room above me, and walking casually, like someone out for an evening stroll, toward the other side. It passed directly over my head, and continued, and stopped. I lay there frozen, staring at the ceiling like it was going to give me an answer. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I kept telling myself, old house, old house, old house. But I knew, with a certainty that I couldn't argue myself out of, that what I had just heard was footsteps. Not pipes. Not wind. Not a house settling. A slow, casual, human pace, walking from one side of an empty room to the other. I got out of bed. I don't even remember deciding to do it. My body just did it for me, and I went straight to my grandpa's room and told him what I heard. He gave me the answer adults always give kids in old houses. The house is old. It creaks. But he must have seen something on my face, because he got up anyway and turned on the dining room light for me, so there'd at least be a little glow spilling into my room from the hallway. A small mercy. I went back to bed feeling slightly less alone, slightly more rational, ready to convince myself it was over. It was not over. It started again. Same end of the room it had stopped at before. Right by the window, the one at the far end of that long narrow room, and began walking again. Slow. Casual. Like it had all the time in the world. It passed over me a second time, and stopped when it reached the door. I lay there, rigid, staring up at my ceiling, telling myself that was it. That was the last of it, when 5 seconds later, I heard something that made my whole body go cold. It was coming down the stairs. I want you to imagine this with me, because I lived it in real time and I need you to feel exactly what I felt. You're lying in the dark. You've just convinced yourself the worst is over. And then you hear, with total clarity, footsteps leaving the room above you and beginning to descend the staircase that leads to your floor. To your hallway. To the house you are currently lying inside of, fully awake, fully alone in your bed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then, silence. A pause, right at the landing, the little platform part way down where the stairs turn. I have walked that exact staircase 100 times in daylight. I know exactly where that landing is. I know exactly how many steps it takes to get there. Then it continued. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And silence again. It had reached the bottom. It was on my floor now. The same floor as my bedroom. The same floor as the hallway outside my door. The same floor, suddenly, as me. I was frozen. Completely and totally frozen. The kind of fear that doesn't feel like adrenaline. It feels like being unplugged. My eyes were locked on the doorway to my room. The dining room light my grandpa had turned on was still glowing faintly through it, and I remember staring at that rectangle of light so hard that it started to blur and distort at the edges, my vision swimming with the kind of dizziness that comes from pure terror, from a body that doesn't know whether to run or collapse. I did the only thing my brain could come up with. I pulled the blanket over my head, like I was 8 years old again, like cotton and polyester could stop anything. And that's when I heard the scratching. It was coming from inside my room. Not from the hallway. Not from the ceiling. From somewhere a few feet away from my bed, and I knew immediately, with a horrible specific clarity, exactly what it was touching. My grandpa's gun case. A locked wooden cabinet that sat against the wall. Long, deliberate scratches, dragging down the front of the wood. And underneath the scratching, something even smaller and somehow worse. The faint, rhythmic tap of the cabinet door knocking gently against its frame, in time with each scratch. Like something was testing it. Touching it the way you'd run your fingernail down a chalkboard, slow and curious. Like it knew exactly what was inside and wanted me to know it knew too. I tried to scream and nothing came out. My throat had locked up completely. I remember forcing myself to take one single breath, the kind of breath that takes everything you have, and then I screamed as loud as I have ever screamed in my life. My grandpa was in my room within seconds. And this is the part that still gets me. He still didn't believe me. Not unkindly. Not dismissively, exactly. Just the practical disbelief of someone who has lived in an old house for decades and has made peace with its noises a long time ago. He checked the room, found nothing, told me again that old houses make sounds, and went back to bed. So I did the only thing that felt like it might actually work. I draped a bedsheet over the side of the bed, all the way to the floor, creating a kind of wall between me and the rest of the room. I wrapped myself tight in a comforter like a cocoon, put on headphones, and turned my back to the door. I made a decision in that moment that has shaped how I sleep in that house to this day. If there was a party of ghosts standing in my room that night, I did not want to know about it. The next morning, my grandpa, half joking, mentioned what happened to my grandma over breakfast. Just a passing comment, the kind of thing you bring up because it's a funny story now that the sun's out. She didn't laugh. She said, completely casually, like she was mentioning the weather, Oh, that's silly. You know, your cousin woke me up the last time she stayed here. She came into my room saying, "I hear footsteps." Nobody had told my cousin about the noises. Nobody had told me, either, before that first night. Two of us, separately, on separate visits, had woken up convinced of the exact same thing, in the exact same house, describing it in almost the exact same words. I slept under the bed for the rest of that visit. Here's the part that I think is somehow worse than that first night. I still stay at that house. I still visit my grandparents regularly. And I still hear it. Every single time, without exception. I sleep on top of the bed now, at least. I gave up the under-the-bed routine eventually, mostly out of stubbornness, but I keep my back to the door, and I sleep with headphones on every single night in that house, no exceptions. It's become a ritual at this point. Not out of habit. Out of necessity. I haven't heard it come down the stairs again since that first night. Just the walking back and forth, twice a night, casual and unhurried, directly above wherever I happen to be sleeping. And I want to be honest with you about something. I don't go looking for answers anymore. I don't ask my grandparents about the history of the house. I don't try to find out who lived there before the family with the two sons. I don't try to figure out what's in that closet, or what used to be in that closet, or why two separate children independently described a gorilla dancing out of it at night decades apart from each other. I just don't want to know. Because if it ever comes down those stairs again, if I ever hear that count start again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, pause at the landing, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, pause at the bottom. I don't want to be awake for it. I still go to that house. I still love my grandparents. I still sleep in that room. I just keep my headphones on. And I keep my back to the door. And some nights, lying there in the dark, listening to nothing, I find myself wondering if the silence is worse than the footsteps ever were. Because at least when I hear it walking, I know exactly where it is.